So glad you're joining us on Conquering Retirement. Brad Johansson with Northern Alliance Financial, Blake King and Cameron Graham. Gentlemen, always nice to be back with you.
Good to see you.
We traverse through a myriad of places throughout Maine. You guys have offices now in 10 spots. Do you end up going back and forth to all of these spots within the state and seeing clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of consider myself a little bit of a road warrior, right? So,
do you enjoy that part of it?
It chops up the day a little bit. You know, it's beautiful scenery out in Maine, and it's just it chops up the day and gives me different exposures to different client base depending on where they're geographically located in the state. There's all different types of personalities, so it's
he
very
travels
nice.
a little bit more than I do.
Does he?
Yeah.
You're kind of backing off the road warrior part of it.
Yeah, I'm more Bangor brewer. I will go to Waterville once in a while. It's about an hour south. And then kind of another client range all the way to Fort Kent, which would be the very tip of Maine. But usually that's like a 3-hour drive. So I'm there a couple times a year.
You may be getting surprised, Cameron. You may be on the road a little bit more than you thought. Obviously, you have to put a plan together. That's my transition into what we're talking about, because we do this all the time with you folks. Is there's probably something simple that you need to lay out that you may not have even thought about, which is putting down a written plan. It's the first chapter in the book. This is going to be yours. I'm confident that it's going to be yours, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. I know it sounds obvious. Like, why is it so important that we sit down to put together a written plan? Because I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to write this whole thing down. I just know what I want. What's so important about putting pen to paper?
I think what's most important about putting pen to paper is with regards to any plan in general, right? There needs to be what's known like as a brainstorming session, right? We need to brainstorm. We need to think of ideas. We need to look at all of the factors that may play into a situation. And then once we've been able to identify either the risks, the resources, whatever it may be, then we start with a game plan. And the game plan itself is a nimble plan, as life is ever evolving and ever changing. We need this plan to be used more or less as like a baseline, right? And then as our life changes, we need to be able to reassess our resources, reassess the government environment. We need to reassess tax law changes and adjust the plan accordingly. So just starting with a plan, as mentioned in chapter 1 of the book, that's the first step. And then the plan can be ever evolving throughout time.
Why a brainstorming session? And I'll throw this out even to you, Cameron, because if I walk in and I say, I don't need a brainstorming session. I know I want to retire. I know I want to have money. I know there's a few things that I'm going to do. Why do I need to brainstorm about what my written plan is going to include?
So that we're thinking of everything, so that we get everything, cover our X's and O's of what we're doing to come up with that game plan. Because if we miss something, it could decimate the entire portfolio or affect our budget, all different types of areas.
But like you like to say, realistic goals.
Yep.
Realistic goals in retirement? I go back to that simplified version. I just want money, and I'd like not to take a pay cut in retirement. What's realistic in the goals that I set for how my retirement looks 10, 20, 30 years down the road?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So by setting realistic goals, you are essentially arming yourself and preparing yourself for what could be. For instance, let's just say you have 2 Social Security incomes and you're making $36,000 as a whole household for just Social Security. And then say your portfolio only consists of, say, maybe $100,000 of investable assets. Well, if you tell me you want to live off of $7,000 a month, I'll come back and tell you your money's probably going to run out within like 3 to 4 years, right?
That's a problem.
It is. So we need to be able to set realistic goals and expectations, right? Setting an expectation as to how things may unfold in the future, because you may just be looking at it at face value. It's our job as fiduciaries to do due diligence and know what we know, because we've spent so many years helping people through retirement that you may not be considering one key factor that could completely derail your plan. And so by setting those realistic goals, it helps you maybe reframe your perspective and be like, oh, you know what? I never thought about that. What would happen if I ran out of money in 3 years, right?
I don't want to think about what would happen if I ran out of money in 3 years. So that goes to an allocation question, Cameron. Is the 4% rule something that we should live by? Because we hear all of here's the rule in my retirement. What's a 4% rule? Is it realistic?
Could be.
Depending on?
It depends on the person.
Okay.
The 4% rule is kind of like a general rule of thumb that you can take 4% of interest from your accounts every year and you'll be fine. You're not going to dwindle your accounts down to nothing. But it also depends on person to person on the other income sources that they might have, whether they can afford to maybe not take 4% and continue to let their accounts grow, or maybe we need a little bit more than 4%. But that's the importance of looking at the whole plan and how we have structured everything in taking those funds.
Okay. What would you say, Blake, is if we're brainstorming and going through the things that I need to check off the list that I have needed to think about in my retirement? Do medical costs become top of the list, or is there something beyond that you're more worried about?
I think medical costs are one of the most overlooked expenses that are real, right? Roughly 7 out of 10 people will need to go into some form of at-home nursing care, an assisted living facility.
These are people after 65?
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing about it is healthcare costs are drastically expensive, right? I mean, on average, it's about $168,000 a year for long-term care costs. And if you don't even have $168,000 in a portfolio, how do you think you're going to be able to afford that? Well, we need to be able to find ways to make sure that we're doing proper planning so that Maine Care can come in and help, protect your assets. But in that same concept, we also need to make sure that if you're wanting to leave some form of legacy, how can we structure your assets right now through proper registrations, proper legal and estate planning documents to make sure that those assets are not attacked by the state to help pay for your long-term care costs.
Is there a difference between traditional and then hybrid long-term care that we're looking at, Cameron?
Yeah, so with traditional care, it's kind of like a use it or lose it. If you use it, great, but if we don't end up needing it, once we pass away, it's gone. There's nothing to pass down to.
Why would I want to do something like that?
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So what we do is we look at some hybrid strategies that are going to pay the cash value if you don't use it, and if you do need it, then that's what it's there for. But if we have that where we don't need it, then we can pass it to our best.
Are these solutions now that have come out more recently? Because most people are familiar with long-term care, and when you talk about I want long-term care insurance, the understanding is I'm going to lose my money. Now we have created solutions that you're talking about in hybrid, where my money's my money, and whatever I build up into it, I am going to use it for that. And if not, it either stays with me or it passes down to beneficiaries, correct?
Correct, yeah. And going back to what Cameron was saying about traditional long-term care is the unfortunate thing, and as people have experienced throughout time, those long-term care companies say, hey, your premiums are going to be increasing, right? They're going to be increasing every 2 to 3 years. And then once you get to a certain point in life and your resources have been dwindled down through expenses, through just, living, right? You end up not being able to afford that long-term care policy any longer. And at that point in time, that's kind of when you need it most, right? So with the hybrid products, the industry itself is ever evolving and ever changing, right? And so we find value that if you can fund a long-term care policy and if there is an additional benefit to it while also sheltering it from the Medicaid spend down clause and pass it on to your heirs, it just your money is being put to you and you're not having to give it to the government. Right.
The thing is, you want options, right? Which is what this helps provide in understanding, coming up with a written plan to brainstorm through all of the what ifs that may go through. Have you done that? Would you like some help? 877-241-7430 is the number of the call to come in for a complimentary written plan. We talked about the book. This is the first chapter in the book of putting together a written plan. There's a copy for you free as you come into the office. You can click the QR code so that we can try and put together a plan that answers all your questions on the what ifs. 877-241-7430. Well, you may say, I want to do this by myself, or I'm going to use AI to help me with my plan. We'll address that when we come back.
Our team at Northern Alliance is very diverse in terms of the services that we offer.
We do take a team-based approach.
We carry multiple licenses so that clients can do everything within the Northern Alliance financial team.
If it has anything to do with retirement, that's what we specialize in.
Budget planning, tax considerations, Social Security strategies, risk management, long-term care, Medicare, health planning, as well as legal and estate planning.
We really are a one-stop shop.
There's Lance Gilman, Peter Hansen, Jeremy Barnard, myself. We do have a staff that is great.
In Maine, we have multiple locations to cover the vast array of the state.
You know, you can come in and have a conversation in person. And a lot of people are looking for these days. Things after COVID have changed to more Zoom, phone call sort of things. And we'll do those things, but we appreciate and would rather have you come in person and have a conversation face to face like this.
We're pretty approachable, and we're going to listen to you. We're going to try to determine what your needs, your aspirations, those goals are, and then we're going to do everything that we possibly can to help you meet those goals.
It's lighthearted, it's carefree. We laugh like crazy. An atmosphere that I don't think is common in a lot of other practices.
We were talking about how well the team is bonding together, how similarly we all think in that what we do, we want to actually make a difference.
Average everyday people helping average everyday people.
You know, we truly do put the client first.
Our mantra has been, when you take care of people, people take care of you.
So glad you're with us on Conquering Retirement. Brad Johansson along with Blake King, Cameron Graham, Northern Alliance Financial. We were talking about putting together a plan, and I sent it to break talking about the difference of doing it yourself and doing it with AI, because it has become popular now, Blake.
Absolutely.
Let's jump in, push something in, say, create a retirement plan for me, AI. What's wrong with that?
Well, AI is a very useful and helpful tool for many different reasons. But the unfortunate thing with AI is it lacks emotional intelligence, right? When you go into your 401k portal and you may see, based off of your current savings rate and what your current income is inside the system, you're going to be able to have X number of dollars for retirement for the rest of your life, right? Well, that's based off of your current allocation and your current contribution rates right now. And as we shift into retirement, we need to be able to de-risk your portfolio so that your portfolio can weather the stormy seas. And AI is not necessarily concentrating on the emotional risk factor associated to this. You know, if you are experiencing significant market losses, that AI person is not, or that AI is not going to console you and say, hey, it's going to be okay. They're going to actually decrease and say, well, now you can live off of $2,000 a month, right? So they completely eliminates the emotional side of things. And I think that's what's really important about working with Northern Alliance and our team, is that we have a lot of compassion for our clients, and we're really there to help you weather the stormy seas.
I think the big thing too is with AI, it's really only going to get adjusted if you probably go update your information that you put into it.
Sure.
We're going to continue to review 2 to 3 times a year at a minimum. We talked about in the last segment, make adjustments within that plan to attack the goals that are unique to each client.
All right. We're talking about creating income as well. Once our job stops, we have to have an income engine, and working at that. Social Security is supposed to be that engine. And unfortunately, we have probably 1 out of every 4 homes in America now living off Social Security alone, and it's not working. Is there a bad Social Security strategy, Cameron?
There can be it's kind of that one time, we got one shot to essentially get it right. And if we take it too early, that's going to be what it is for our remainder of our life. And if we need more money, or if we could have delayed it, then we could have had a higher payout when we reach our full retirement age, or delaying it till 70. So there's a lot of stuff to kind of factor into that in deciding the best time to take it.
Right. And if I could just
absolutely,
step in
Blake.
here, is what we like to call filing for Social Security is really $1 million decision, right? You may not have $1 million in your 401k portfolio. But when you elect for your Social Security benefits and you think about the life expectancy that you will have for the rest of your life, either your life or your surviving spouse's life, you could potentially, if you filed for Social Security at the wrong time that is not specific and unique to your situation, you could be leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table just because you heard your friend down the road say, hey, I filed for Social Security at this age and, I wouldn't look back, right? But there's a lot of external factors that come into play when filing for Social Security, because we call it $1 million decision, because you could think about from a household, you may be able to receive $1 million throughout your retirement life, and it's all based off of one irreversible decision.
Significant, which is also significant is the word with the tax situation that we probably overlook. We said in the beginning of the program that maybe medical is one of the most overlooked things that we go into a plan, probably maybe more now than ever. Taxes are probably something that are overlooked, Cameron. As we look into a tax situation, are there tax efficient strategies that we may miss if we don't put together this plan going in?
Yeah, we're definitely going to take a look at all different types of accounts, how they're taxed, what are the complications of taking money from these different accounts, because one thing we don't want to do is push somebody into a higher tax bracket.
Right.
Nobody wants to pay more taxes. So we do use a few software engineers with Covisum that kind of shows us maybe some opportunities for Roth conversions, but just really formulating a plan of action so that we're staying within our tax bracket or lowering our tax bracket, definitely not pushing into a higher one.
Is it ignored too often, Blake, going into a plan that we don't figure in the taxes?
I think it's important. I don't necessarily know if it's 100% ignored. It's something that we're always cognizant of.
Sure.
And we always want to be able to get copies of your 1040s and your tax statements so that there may be outside income sources that may not be shared during our meetings or whatever it may be. But if we have the ability to create a tax efficient income strategy, think about it when you're taking withdrawals out of your account. If you're taking withdrawals out of your account and you need a net number for cash flow purposes, if we can actually pull it, say, either from checking, savings, your Roth bucket to where you're going to be in a lower tax bracket, that means you're pulling less out of your traditional IRA to net the same cash flow. So it's those types of tax mitigation strategies that we're constantly cognizant of during our planning process.
How do we diversify income? Because we talk about having money in different places, in different buckets, and making sure that we go, how do we diversify income in retirement?
Diversifying income is something that is constantly being considered during our planning process, because we want to take a look at, number one, what are our fixed protected income sources?
Okay.
So what are these income sources that are going to be coming in consistently on a monthly basis? For most people, that's Social Security. For others, it may be their main PERS, the pension system. It may be their company pension system, right? Then there also may be rental properties associated to it, or some form of business ownership that's kicking out different types of revenue streams associated to that. So there's all these different types of income sources that we're getting from different places, and how is that affecting us from a taxation standpoint. But the people that we find that have the most successful retirement are individuals that have multiple continuous fixed income sources.
Interesting. And the question is, have you thought about those? Are you involved in those? Have you thought about the taxes? Have you thought about the choice for Social Security and when you're going to do it? All of that is math. And if we put the math together, we can make the plan that's just right for you, that is different than anyone else that you may have been talking to at the water cooler or down the street. Why don't you come in for a complimentary plan? 877-241-7430 and meet with the guys at Northern Alliance Financial to go through a plan that works for you, that considers all the questions that you may have. 877-241-7430 or scan the QR code on your screen. Let's see you in the office. We'll be right back.
As individuals, we strive for better, from a better house to a better career to a better life for our kids. But when it comes to your retirement, what does better mean to you? More income? A flexible lifestyle? Better solutions? A better retirement always begins with a plan. To find out how to make your retirement plan better, give us a call. You only retire once. This is your opportunity to plan for better.
Glad you're with us on Conquering Retirement. Brad Johansson with Blake and Cameron, Northern Alliance Financial, and we're talking about putting together a plan. When we do that, we need to plan for the unexpected. Let's go through in this final segment some of the things that we probably need to pay attention to. Cameron, number one goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, the healthcare costs. How do we prepare in healthcare costs?
Yeah, one thing that I like to do is we work with some of the top Medicare agents throughout the state, and referring them over to those Medicare agents to take a look at the whole plan on what is best for them. Maybe it's somebody who's retiring before 65. They can't have Medicare till they're 65, so we got to formulate some type of health care for them before then, and that's going to be expensive. So referring them over to the Medicare agent to take a look at everything and find out the best policy and the best plan for them moving forward.
Blake, if I go to home ownership, what do I need to pay attention to in home ownership if I'm going into retirement?
Yeah, with home ownership, one thing that we talk about with our clients is what's called right sizing, right? Right sizing for retirement. So let's just say you have a beautiful large home and
let's say that.
Yeah, right. And it just becomes so much of a time. It takes away so much time, resources, money, because you got to update your roof, you got to get a new boiler, you got to update your wood stove, you need to get all these different things. And with these unexpected costs that we know are going to be coming down the pipeline, because you got to replace your roof every 20 years, right?
It's just the way it goes.
It's just the way it is. We need to be able to budget for that, right? Or at least start thinking about, hey, there's going to be this large unexpected cost, or there's going to be this large cost coming down the road. Is this something that you can financially afford? Or does it make sense for you to actually sell your house, take the profits, right size down into something smaller that's a lot more manageable, and then use those additional assets from the sale of your house to create a steady, predictable, reliable cash flow stream?
We really haven't touched on inflation, and that's probably one of the 5 that we need to deal with. If you go from 2020 COVID to now, we were over 20% in inflation, and this is compounding stuff that a lot of times isn't figured into a plan.
Yeah, a lot of times it's not, and that's something we got to look at to make sure that our investments are keeping up at least with inflation, because if we're just holding on to a bunch of cash, let's say, it's just sitting there, we're essentially losing money all the time, every single year. Yeah. So just making sure that we're using different types of investment vehicles to keep up with at least inflation.
Yeah, I mean, 50-year average is at 3.8, and for what we've done over the last 4 years, we're unfortunately killing that number. We go to taxes that we talked about in a previous segment. Planning for this and understanding where you are, how we do conversions in brackets to keep you in a spot that's going to be good for you, and the timing of all of that becomes extremely important.
Absolutely. One of the big legislations it's sunsetting here on December 31st of 2025 is the Tax Cut Jobs Act, right? That's sunsetting at the end of 2025. And so we need to essentially get good while the getting's good and max out our current tax brackets if we can, because as it's foreseen here in 2026, the 12% is going to be jumping up to the 15%. The 22 is going to be jumping up to the 25. And so that is a significant tax shift. And depending on where legislation goes or where the economy goes, that's always a moving target. We never know where the tax brackets are going to be depending on who's in office or whatever it may be, right? So we need to make sure that how we structure our portfolios and our cash flows, if we can keep our tax liability as low as possible while still give you the lifestyle that you want, that's what's really important, right? And
the legislative risk that you talk about, because there are people who believe that it may not sunset at 2025 with Trump now taking office. But what is going to happen as this government approaches now $37 trillion in debt, and how are we going to pay all of that off? We've got 15 more. If you're going to take 30 years in retirement, you got 15 more congressional elections that you've got to go through, where legislative risk has to be played into the plan. I want to talk about longevity because we're now all living longer. A lot of times we don't figure. My mom's now 96. Working into that, still working out 3 days a week, and just renewed her driver's license.
Yeah.
I don't recommend that. But the thing is, we have to plan for living longer. Is the money going to last, Cameron?
Yeah, and that's probably the number one fear of a lot of retirees is outliving their money.
Yeah.
Not, being concerned that they don't have enough. So the good thing is we're living longer, but the bad thing is we're living longer.
Yeah.
So we got to have some type of plan too. We go back to the income plan we talked a little bit about. And we're not just looking at that income plan for the next 5 years. We're going to try to project that out for 20, 25 years till we're age 90, 100, to make sure that our money is going to last us and we're going to be okay.
This is why the brainstorming becomes so important, because there's so many things to figure into this, Blake.
There is. There's so many. And so many things that we may not even know about that you may teach us, right? There's just, it's always going to be a moving target, but our job is to hit the target.
Well, the job is hitting the target in so many different areas. All of those areas are covered in the book that Lance Gilman has put together, Conquering Retirement. The questions that you may have, and I say all the time, the questions you may not know that you have are then opened up in this, because you worked your whole life to do this, and what you did very well. Now we're heading into retirement, and nobody taught me how to do that. That's why we're here, with perspective, because we've done it hundreds of times. So we'd love to see you into the office to put together a complimentary written plan. Copy of the book is yours complimentary as well. To put together a plan so that you don't head into retirement and go, I'm not going to make it. We want you to make it in the way that you want to make it. 877-241-7430 to put together a plan that's just perfect for you. It's not like anybody else's. We'd love to see you in one of our 10 offices throughout the state. Wherever's convenient for you, let's make a plan for you that lasts. We're grateful for your time. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time, and I hope to see you in the office.